Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm Dr. David, your host, and here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing and spirituality and social transformation. Some of these shows, I'm doing the in-depth interview of someone that I'm interested in learning more about and bringing them to you. And then in some of the shows, I select someone that I think would be really useful to interview me and draw me out on a particular topic or a particular theme. And that's the type of show that it is today. And so today, we're going to be exploring thriving in today's world, thriving as opposed to just surviving. Today's world, how does today's world differ from even 5 years ago, a generation ago, 2, 3 generations ago, and what are the unique challenges and opportunities of this particular now moment? And to begin to explore some of the key ideas that can help flesh that out. And if we have time, we'll get into just a few strategies, tactics, tips, techniques that could naturally follow out of this big picture, some of these key ideas that could empower you right away to upgrade both the quality of your life and also your effectiveness in life. And so I've asked my dear friend and student, Karmjit Singh, to interview me. This isn't our first rodeo. We've done quite a few interviews before, and I think we have a good feeling of how to dance together. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm just going to turn the show over to Karmjit, and I'm in her hands. And then at the very end, she'll turn it back to me for any closing remarks, and I'll share my contact information for people who would like to explore the possibility of taking a deeper dive into my teachings and what it's all about. So with that as a framework, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Karmjit Singh.
Thank you so much, Dr. K. And thank you for this opportunity to connect with you and to interview again. So I think one place that would be great for us to start is if you would share, what prompted you to want to have this interview at this time? Why is this important to you? And what do you want to accomplish?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. So unless somebody's totally had their head in the sand for the last few months, it's becoming pretty obvious to most people who are awake at some level that this is very unusual times, in the sense that it's becoming more and more obvious that the prevailing institutions of our society, the prevailing level of ethics and morality, the fundamental agreement of what it means to be an American, all of these, even what is real and what is true, many of these things that were taken for granted for a long time, whether they be accurate or inaccurate, we were sort of existing within whatever it is that we were unconsciously taking for granted about all those things. And then we ended up with the kind of life that allows for. And then now we're going through a period where these fundamental sense of who we are as individuals, who we are as Americans, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's important, what's not important, even to the point of what's real, is very fluid, very shaky for many people. And given most people's level of consciousness, that level of uncertainty and fluidity is frightening. and can produce various kinds of long-term stresses, physically, emotionally, financially, sociologically. Uh, uh, and you can see the stresses building in any area of life that you look. You can see it biologically in the reduction in sperm counts. You can see it in reduction in the increase in the number of miscarriages. You can see it in the increase in chronic disease, even in young people. Uh, you can see it in the increasing amount of money that's being thrown at diseases while our country continues to decline in terms of levels of health. So there's something missing in our model of healthcare that is obviously not working anymore. You can see it in our schools in terms of literacy rates, math rates. You can see it in terms of the quality of people that are going into teaching. You can see it in terms of the quality of people that make it to the top in politics. You can see it in the reduction in the quality of discourse in terms of public debates, the media, the level of trust in the media, general ethical standards. You can see it in pretty much anywhere that you would look. You could see it in financial breakdowns of our current financial system and banking system. You can see that an increasing number of people feel that organized religion is not working for them. So rates of going to churches or synagogues or mosques is getting lower. So in any way that you look, you can see that there's something about the way we're being and the way we're thinking and the way we make decisions and the way we set our priorities in terms of where we're putting our attention, how we're using our money, how we're spending our time, that is not producing for most people either a quality of life or an effectiveness in life that they're really after. And most people, if they're honest, will tell you that their quality of life and their effectiveness in life and their confidence in the future has reduced dramatically over the last 20 years. And so you could sum all that up by saying that we're a culture in crisis. And I would agree with that in the sense that there is this massive breakdown going on in all our structures, all our institutions. And I would expand that thought to even include our metaphysical structures. In other words, what we believe is true and even how we know, our tests for knowing what is true. And most people's level of critical thinking capacity is not what it was. And that could be for many reasons that we don't have time to go into. But my point is that this crisis has a ubiquitous quality to it. And it's almost unconfrontable for most people. And so that makes them even more easy to manipulate because it's unconfrontable for them to look at it, and you can't master something that you're not examining, you're not aware of. And so that's the bad news, quote unquote. But the good news is, and this kind of gets into what I wanted to talk about the big picture, is all of the energy that's been bound up in these dysfunctional structures and systems that are breaking down. As these structures and systems break down, is when they're let go of, either through revelation or through some kind of crisis, all of the energy that's bound up in those systems and structures are released to their primordial neutral state. And so there's a tremendous amount of liberated energy that's been bound up in these systems and structures that are now available to be reconstituted in new ideas, new systems, new structures, new ways of being and doing things, that is an enormous opportunity for new possibilities and exploration. And so that's the flip side of crisis, which the masters who basically were the progenitors of Taoism and the I Ching understood this very well because they were very wise. And it turns out that in the I Ching, the same symbol or hexagram for crisis is the same hexagram or symbol for opportunity. And so there is the possibility or the opportunity to be with all this as an opportunity, but it's not naturally occurring that way for most people because of what I mentioned earlier, that the rate of change is so fast and so ubiquitous. And if your sense of identity is tied up into the ideas and the structures and institutions and practices that are breaking down, it could be very terrifying psychologically, and that has profound impact physically as well. And so it would be nice if we were starting with a clear slate and we could just look at the opportunities. But that's not the case. We're starting where we really are. And where we are is where most people are, is that they're in fear, they're in denial, they're in fundamentalism, they're in right, wrong, they're in judgment, they're in good and bad, they're in sophomoric, looking for the easy sophomoric interpretation and answers, which makes people much more vulnerable to manipulation and domination, control, fascism, communism, socialism, taking your rights away in the name of security. And so this is where we are. And so we can't just pretend that we're in a clean slate right now and we can just go to the opportunities. We need to have a better understanding of who we are as in the truth of our being, so that we have the space to look at all this. And then we need to look at all this. And how did this happen? Why is this happening? What's the big picture? What's, what is it? Is this just random? Is it just a roll of, random dice that you and I are here right now having this conversation? Is it just the roll of the dice that there happens to be this technology that you and I can pretty much transcend space and time by having this conversation as if we were right in front of each other, and that other people could listen to it 5 years from now? Is all of this an accident that this is occurring at the same time? Is it an accident that AI is coming on the scene now? What are the potential benefits and dangers of that? There's so much to look at. And so I want to encourage people to have the faith for now that this is not random, and that there's an incredible opportunity here if we can be in a way where we really can access the opportunity and not just pretend it. And then once people are open to that idea, then I want to challenge them even further to go to an even bigger idea. And that is that we are multidimensional beings, and that our sense of ourselves as David Kamnitzer or Karmjit Singh in a particular physical body, in a particular incarnation, that's not the fullness of who we are. That, for lack of a better word, you could say we have an infinite, eternal aspect of our being that you could call our soul, that once it has been created by our creator, has been given the gift of infinite life and has and is a unique fractal of that divine creator. So it's embodying both the principles of unity, but also the principle of uniqueness without having to imply duality and separateness, which is a very powerful idea. And then if you begin to entertain that idea, I'm inviting you to open up to the possibility that as a soul, there was an aspect of your soul that was not bound to a particular time-space coordinate, that had a tremendous amount of wisdom of understanding universal rhythms and cycles. And that as our higher self, we actually chose to have an incarnation in a particular time-space coordinate where we knew from that level, where we knew from our higher self level, that that would be a time where, number one, we might be able to help the transition. Number two, that we would be challenged tremendously to develop capacities that were laying dormant, but that from this crisis would draw out aspects of ourselves that likely wouldn't have been drawn out without the crisis. It's kind of like if you were an elite athlete and you wanted to be the best version of yourself as an athlete, you would want to challenge yourself against really stiff competition to see how good you really are, or to see if you could, through that competition, become an even better version of yourself as an elite athlete. So if you can open up to the possibility that that is part of the big picture, that you're not even here by accident, that that's not even part of any randomness either, and that you're here to learn some things you wanted to learn, you're here to contribute some things you wanted to contribute, and you wanted to grow in ways and experience things from a unique vantage point of this unique divine marriage of body and soul, which allows you to have certain types of feelings and emotions and perspectives that would be very difficult if you did not do this. And if you can open up to this big picture and this big picture, then a question that often comes up is, in this play of light and dark, of good and evil, what is the dark side after? You know, if they're not here to uplift and empower and liberate and harmonize as best as possible with the laws of creation, the laws of nature, the laws of God, however you want to construe it, what are they up to, and why would a loving God allow that? If you're honest and you really want to understand the truth of human existence, your questions are, you're sooner or later, you're going to ask yourself these questions, and you're going to want to get answers that are deeply satisfying to you. And that's part of the journey, is to understand that this dark side, this competitor, this challenger is allowed within great parameters to exercise its free will. And what it wants to do is it wants to control and dominate. And the thing is that the darkness, by denying its connection to love and light, has abdicated its access to its power to create. Therefore, the only way it can pursue its agenda is to have a parasitic relationship with a host. And guess who the host is? Guess what the meal is? Well, the meal is your consciousness, is your energy, is your DNA. Okay. So if they can scramble your DNA, right? If they can make it difficult for you to access your divine antenna, so to speak, right? And if they can trigger you into chronic fear and stress and even terror, imagine that there are energies that are released at that time where, number one, it's easy for you to give your power away without you knowing it. And number two, what if the emotions that you're releasing when you're in those spaces, what if that is actually like food for the parasite? In the same way that if you're serving the light, the energies of truth and beauty and joy and service and excellence and integrity are food for our soul. Okay. And the good thing about the good thing about all this is, number one, when you realize that darkness is the absence of light, the denial of light, it's not the opposite of light. Light has no opposite, just has its absence. That's powerful. And then when you realize that the dark cannot create, that it requires two to tango, then you realize that the more conscious you are and the more committed you are to seeing how you gave your power away, and then you can own it without blaming yourself, you can have tremendous compassion for the whole game, including the character you've been playing in the game. Then you can take back your power. And then when you understand the dynamic that the dark cannot create and you're taking back your power, you can starve out the dark to the point where the dark can't get the food it's looking for in you. And if we had a culture like that, the dark wouldn't be able to get the food that it's looking for through our culture or our planet, or this, at least this version of our planet. And so, excuse me. So sorry about that. So everything in our culture is designed so that if you don't consciously entertain these ideas, chances are you're going to be food for that parasite. And the challenge that you as a soul from the higher self dimension of your soul set for yourself in this incarnation may be that you set the intention to see that if I agree to forget who I really am and I get lost in the Maya, can I find myself again such that in the process of finding myself, I develop latent capacities and strengths and qualities that, number one, I wanted to develop as a soul. And that, number two, that these qualities are actually the leadership quality designed for me to be of greatest service at this time. And then to take it to an even bigger picture, part of why now is that the Earth community is part of a community of this solar system, which is part of a community of this galaxy, which is part of the community of the universe and all that is. And so from a physical point of view, there would be no life as we know it on planet Earth if it weren't for the existence and the activity of our sun. And so one of the things that's interesting is astronomers have been tracking solar activity. So the sun doesn't have a constant level or release of energy. It's like the earth. It has seasons, it has a rhythm to it that is not random either. And so one of the ways that the sun expresses itself is through what are called CMEs, or coronal mass ejections, or solar flares. And we can measure these solar flares now. And it turns out that we're in a period of increasingly intense solar flares, which are like quantum releases of energy that ripple through our entire solar system and impact the Earth and all life on Earth and in Earth. And so in terms of the timing of it all, if you can expand your consciousness to realize that there are extraplanetary forces involved at this level of solar physics, plus if you open your mind to the idea that there are more advanced races and civilizations that exist in different dimensions from our dimension, that have a profound relationship with humanity and the DNA of humans and the interference, sometimes well-meaning, sometimes not well-meaning interference of that DNA. So for example, scientific materialism would say that our DNA is simply an evolutionary extension of primates. But there's a lot of things archaeologically, anthropologically, that would make that very difficult to believe, in the sense that we had quantum leaps in terms of language, artifacts, musical instruments, architecture that appeared in different places on the planet at relatively the same period of time, when there was no overt communication systems among these continents. And molecular biologists now know that about 200,000 years ago, there were similar chromosomal mutations that took place around the world that would be very difficult to explain through random genetic randomness. And so it's useful to open up to the possibility that there are civilizations and intelligences in our universe that are much more spiritually and technologically advanced than we are, who have a stake in the game of what's going on here. A sincere interest, a karmic interest in how all this unfolds. And imagine that it's kind of like Star Trek. Imagine that there's a prime directive of non-interference with the natural growth of our culture, but at the same time, there are certain limits to that rule. There's certain dispensations to keep the playing field, such that the point of the game is still in play. So for example, imagine, if you will, that there have been multiple attempts at nuclear detonations over the last several decades, that if it weren't for the benevolent intervention of these societies, these beings, would have led to nuclear detonations that would have had a devastating effect on not only all life on Earth, but would have rippled through our entire solar system and beyond. So understanding this bigger picture even if you don't believe it, even if you don't know it to be true, if you just entertain the possibilities of everything that I'm saying without believing it or disbelieving it, but you just be in the possibility of the invitation that I'm offering. If you look at your life from that possibility, in terms of looking at your life about what you feel, what you think, what you say, what you don't say, what you feel, what you don't feel, what's possible, what you believe is possible, what you believe is not possible. If you look at your life that way, you'll see things you didn't see before. If you look at our culture and ask those same questions from the possibility I'm offering, you'll see things you didn't see before. You'll have new questions you didn't have before. You'll have ahas you didn't have before. Some things will start to make sense. You'll have new things you're wondering about. And from my point of view, this is very healthy. This is what I'm offering is a conversation that allows for the possibility of a new possibility for you and for our culture. Certainly no guarantee, but I can guarantee you that if you don't consider these things and you go back to whatever it is you were being or doing before you considered these things, I can guarantee you that the quality of your life and your effectiveness in life will continue to go downward, both as an individual and as a culture. It'll get a lot worse before it gets better. And I say that a lot of us are here to midwife this shift so that it doesn't have to get a lot more worse than it is now before it gets better. So that's the big and bigger picture that I'm inviting you and our viewers and our listeners to consider. I don't care if you believe me at all. I don't care if you don't believe me. In fact, if you believe me, it probably won't make much of a difference because it'll be just another thing you believe in and you won't know it or not. But I'm inviting you to use a different muscle in your being other than the muscle you probably usually use when someone's talking to you about something. You're probably thinking, do I believe it or not? Do I agree with it or disagree with it? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if you agree or disagree, or if you believe me or don't believe me, because none of that will be powerful enough to make the difference that I'm inviting you to make. The difference I'm inviting you to make can only come from being with what I'm saying like a possibility, and then having the courage to step inside that possibility and look out from that possibility and see what you see, think what you think, feel what you feel, desire what you desire, wonder what you wonder. It's from that possibility that you can create a clean slate for yourself to have access to the opportunities at hand, rather than just constantly reacting to crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. So that's the bigger picture that I feel is very important to get out to you, to get out to other people, but not like another thing to believe in or not believe in. In that case, it won't make any difference.
Thank you for sharing all that. So there was a lot that you shared that I would love to unpack some of that to see if we can make it a little bit more concrete, and then like continue on the conversation. Like, so, but I want to first make sure that I understood like what you were saying. So there is stuff that's happening. I want to come back to that, but there's stuff that's happening, and what I'm sensing from you is that there is extraplanetary bodies, so to speak, entities, life force that have a stake in what happens here. However, there has been laws that, hey, you don't interfere with what's happening with the earth unless it's some it's going to create a crisis where it kind of kills everything off. only then do you like interfere. So that's a sense that I'm getting. So far, so good. Okay. And then also the other thing I heard you say is that there's different ways to look at, what's happening. There is indeed a crisis happening, and you don't want to necessarily look away from it. You want to be able to see that, but you can also see it as an opportunity. And so you're inviting all of us to be able to kind of be open to the possibility of what you're saying and look through that and see, okay, well, what am I noticing? And so that's a sense that I get. But I've got a couple questions. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I would say there's another big idea that I think is important to put in the pot as a foundational piece.
Okay.
And that is that as the fullness of who you are, you chose to be here now. And that your choice was very thoughtfully, well thought out, in conjunction with very wise beings that had a very broad perspective about your soul and who you are. And that there's a very non-random nature to the fact that you are in a physical body on planet Earth in this unique time-space coordinate. That's another really big piece of the puzzle, because in my experience, unless you embrace the possibility of that possibility, there's a missing link there that doesn't allow the whole meal to really be tasty.
Yes. I'm actually really glad that you said that, because I did note it down, but I had forgotten it in that moment. Yes, absolutely. And actually,
and that issue of responsibility without blame is really key. I can't punctuate that strongly enough.
so I want to come back to that first. If we can take a step back and talk a bit about, what is happening now. I know that you said at the beginning, right? Like, unless you've had your head in the sand, you probably know. But some of us don't watch the news, or don't stay on top of lots of things. However, we might have heard things here and there, and therefore, we create like a picture of what is happening. I'd love to get your perspective on what is happening.
That's part of the issue, is that people that are just watching mainstream media are just getting what the dark side wants you to hear. Look at who owns those channels, and look at what they're after, and they're not after your empowerment.
Yes.
So that's an important, that's a challenging thing to psychologically confront, that there are people who are in positions of influence in our society who not only don't care about you, but it's worse than that. And then the challenge is to be able to realize that and see that without going into judgment. Like, this is a very important point. And I would say for my spiritual students, this has been probably the most challenging step in their journey. And you can get stuck in this one if you don't get it. You can get stuck in it for ages. And that is the conundrum that on the spiritual path, the more you see, the more opportunities you have to simply go into judgment about more things that you see. And the more you go into judgment, the more you close yourself off to your own love and your own power, and the more you become a better host for the parasite.
So could you?
So in this case, the ability to see that there are very powerful people and forces in the world that want to have you either partially debilitated, partially brain dead, or actually dead, and just over broke and terrified all the time, so that you will give up your constitutional rights in exchange for quote unquote some security and maybe a place to live and a bite to eat. Once you see how clearly that is obvious, to not judge yourself for not having seen it sooner, for not concluding that it shouldn't have happened, is a very mature spiritual position to take, because it's very easy it would be very easy if you stayed in your prior level of consciousness. It would be very easy to say that it's bad and wrong that that's happening, instead of being discerning and saying, I don't want it to be that way anymore. It's helping me see how important these rights that I've taken for granted are. And it's helping me to become more of a better steward of these divine rights that I have previously abdicated. And see, this is where a little spiritual knowledge without a good teacher can be very dangerous, because you start to take your head out of the sand and you start to see things you didn't see before. And it's really natural in the beginning when you see the matrix, you see the game. It's totally natural. And we all have gone through this, who've passed through this. We've all gone through this stage where we're in shock. And then we've all gone through this phase where we are terrified. And then we've all gone through this phase where we are so sad, and where we feel powerless and where we feel it's hopeless. And it's totally natural to go through those phases. And without a good guide, it's easy to stay stuck there. And if you're stuck there, I'll bet you dimes to dollars that psychologically you'll be in so much pain that you will go back to whatever your old coping mechanisms and addictions are for avoiding reality. And then you'll be worse off in terms of your level of conscious suffering. You'll be worse off than the person who just likes to go to the bar every night. And I have seen this. We're talking about human lives. And this is why I'm such a stickler. You could even say a snob when it comes to the importance of really having the right guidance if you're gonna put your toe in this water. Because there are profound implications. When I say profound, I mean radical, as in the word, meaning of the word, which is root. There are profound implications for your life and the choices you make and why you make them, and your priority of values. As this possibility that I'm offering you comes to life for you more and more, you know, and Jesus said you can't serve two masters. In other words, once you are being a different level of being, your thoughts and priorities and tastes and preferences and what you resonate with and what you become interested in and what you become less interested in and what you don't resonate with, those will naturally shift. And there's nothing you can do about that. You can deny it, you can resist it, you can try to juggle your life to keep it the way it was and still grow spiritually, but you will fail because it's just natural law. that this is going to happen. And so your love of truth and your love of love must at some point become your top priority if you're going to continue to allow this transformation to continue to unfold. And literally, your tastes in food will change, your tastes in art, music, conversation, ideas, people you want to hang with, places you want to go, businesses you want to frequent. It will all shift. And if you don't understand what's going on, and if your sense of who you are is grounded in infinity, in other words, if who you are is attached to these foods you used to eat, these people you used to like, these desires you used to have, these people you'd like to hang with, if that is a higher priority for you than your love of truth or your love of love, then you'll abort your mission. And so even the exposure to this conversation is very catalytic. I mean, there's a big responsibility I'm taking just putting this into the ethers and into the airwaves. So I'm very conscious about doing it now, right? I'm saying things to you now that I didn't say 5 years ago to you. Okay, so there's a wisdom, there's a timing involved in all of this. There's a sequencing that needs to happen. And so if you're looking for collective transformation, this is why those of us that are on the cutting edge can be so impatient, because we want it now. But if the shifts we wanted to see happened all at once now, there would be the kind of chaos that we wouldn't want. You see? And that's true for yourself too. If you completely realized who you were all at once, you probably wouldn't be able to find the door. So there's a grace. There's a mercy to all of this. And our being and our unfoldment and our challenges are all a part of that divine grace and mercy.
So one of the things that I heard you say, was the mission that we've all. So in your view, you believe that every single person here has come with the mission for this particular time, and
they're playing a certain part. Not everybody necessarily came with the mission I'm describing. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everyone who is on Earth now is a star seed or is a light worker. I'm not saying that. Okay. But I'm saying there's a significant number of beings. I'm talking about in the millions, mm-hmm. in the tens of millions that are on planet Earth, on the surface of planet Earth right now, that fit this description. And it doesn't take a mathematical majority of people to tip the scales, because the light is so powerful. The love is so powerful. Truth is so powerful. I don't know if you're familiar with the experiments that were done. I think they were done around the turn of the century, maybe in the 90s, where they took the most advanced meditators of transcendental meditation, and they had them all focus on sending light to a particular city. And then they looked at the changes in emergency room admissions and criminal murders, rapes, burglaries, significant changes. And so you don't need a mathematical majority to shift things.
I think it was like 10%, right? That
Less.
What would
Less.
make
I think it was the square root of 1% of the population. So if the population was like, like eight, like 8 billion, then like the square root of that would be like 900 something. And then the square root of that would be 1% would be like, oh no, the square root of 1%. So if you're 8 billion, so 1% of that is 80 million. Okay. And then I believe the square root of 80 million is like 90, like 90,000 or something. So it's powerful. It's very powerful.
Yes, that is
But
very
it's just
powerful.
it's the coherence of that square root of the 1%. That's why it needed to be advanced meditators, because the mind has to be trained to be able to focus on one particular thought or one particular intention or one particular image. And so by bringing the love focus through coherent thought, it's the combination of the love with the laser-like coherence of thought that produces manifestation, that influences those fundamental particles I talked about in the beginning that are now being released through the breakdown to be reorganized. Well, that's how it gets reorganized. It gets reorganized through the combination of love and clear thought.
So it's very powerful to know that a small number of people can make a significant difference, and there's scientific proof to be able to see that that actually has happened multiple times over and over, that they've been able to measure these things.
Absolutely. In fact, the dark side wants you to not believe that. Okay. And so if you're familiar with the life of Buckminster Fuller, probably the greatest inventor in the 20th century, he tells this story because he spent a lot of time in the Navy. He said, if you have a huge ship, you want to steer the ship, you have to get control of the rudder. And you have to be able to move the rudder that'll move the ship. But the rudder itself is even too big to directly control. But there's a little part of the rudder that's called the trim tab. And if you turn the trim tab, it'll turn the rudder, and then it'll turn the ship. And so if we want to be effective transformers for the light, we need to know what is the difference that makes the difference. We need to trim tab. We need to find that trim tab, and then we need to know how to move it so that the rudder moves, so the ship moves in the direction that is that resonates with divine will in a harmonic way rather than in a dissonant way. And so from my experience, the debates and the arguments and the discussions that most people have from this point of view don't make any difference. They're nowhere near the trim tab. You see? And so what I'm about is inviting people into a possibility that gives them access to the trim tab. To me, most of what passes for discussions are discussions about how to rearrange the furniture on the Titanic. That's how it occurs for me. It's incredibly boring, and it doesn't make any difference in terms of being able to turn the rudder which turns the ship.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, so it doesn't matter in one sense what anyone's beliefs are, you know, whether they believe that this thing is right, this thing is like none of that in a sense matters, because that's not close to the trim tab. So
I
for
mean,
all of us,
you can see that that's what we've done, and look what we've got.
yeah, so we've looked, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to take my word for that one. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're arguing about whether this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. There, you know, we've done that. And we've got what we've got. And if we just do it more, better, different, with more sophisticated intelligence, by intelligence, I mean information, with greater technology, with greater speed, with greater power, we'll just get more of what we've got faster. And this is exactly what the dark side wants. Exactly. This is exactly what the dark side wants, because that the energy that's created from that, number one, it's their food. Number two, it keeps you hypnotized from ever finding the trim tab. And it's the oldest game in town, divide and conquer, so that no one knows who the real enemy is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the oldest game in town. And they play good cop, bad cop, right? They generate miserable conditions, and then they throw you a bone, so you're grateful. Oh God, universal basic income. Oh, thank you. Oh, you know, it's the oldest game in town. And you can't see it until you can see it. And then once you can see it, now you have the next challenge, which I'll repeat, and that's to not get stuck in judgment that it shouldn't be that way. Maybe that's exactly what needed to happen for you to tap into a level of ability and love and discernment and wisdom that you as your higher self wanted to cultivate. And it's exactly that, the cultivation of those abilities and virtues, that not only give you a better quality of life and make you more effective, but it's also the exact part of the exact same being set and skill set that you require to be a leader, to assist others during this critical time where people are going to really benefit from a loving, caring being who also has this level of wisdom and also has this commitment to be of service. See, that's the tricky part of the game. It's not that hard to see that there's a lot of stuff going on that is off. That's not the hardest part. Okay, it's a critical part, but that's not the hardest part. Because if you go back into judgment about everything that you're seeing, and you start judging yourself and you start judging others, you start closing down your own heart, you cut yourself off from your own power, now you are unwittingly serving the dark. And that game's been going on a long time. A long, long time. Is just now, it's harder to hide it now. Okay. It's because now we have alternative information, we have whistleblowers, it's harder to hide it now. Plus, they're getting so brazen that they think that it doesn't matter if they hide it anymore or not. So before we go any further, it might be useful for you as a proxy of the audience to shift gears a little bit and share for you as a person, not as an interviewer, but for you as a person, what is happening for you in this conversation.
Sure. So I can share that, there's a number of things that are happening, and a part of me, so there was something that you said, and which is where I was hoping that we'd go next, which is that whatever you're seeing in the world, right? So I think this was a really important point. Like, okay, so whatever you're seeing, if you're as a person feeling anxious or unsure or in fear of like, hey, I don't know what's happening, like if you are in that place, then there's some things that I think you can share with us that we can use to kind of get a little bit clarity, to save yourself, to kind of calm down so you can rise up to that leadership role, or rise up just to, you know what I'm saying, to be able to.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is to develop the willingness and the skill to tell the truth about that without trying to fix it like something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the key. Is there's a lot of people become aware, but then they want to try to fix it like it's wrong, and they're wrong for having it. And you can't fix it that way. You can't, that just makes it worse.
So what's the difference between fixing it and taking actions to change it?
The action is premature at that point, because if you're trying to fix it, any action you take is going to be a reaction to the thing you're wanting to get rid of. Mm-hmm. You're resisting the thing you want to get rid of, and then it's just going to be bigger in your face. Mm-hmm. See, that's the part that Americans have the most difficult time with. This is what I was getting at earlier. This is where I was pointing at when I said a spiritual student can get stuck at that point for ages. You see, it's like saying that God blew it. It's like saying it shouldn't be that way. It's like saying God shouldn't have allowed that. God's making a mistake and I need to fix it. And so if you're being that way, how can you really love God? You see, there's a glitch in that whole strategy. There's a glitch, there's a lie in there. And the lie is that I have to push against what I don't want metaphysically in order to move toward what I do want. That's the lie.
And so how to be with that instead?
Is you become aware that you're in a non-useful state, right? And you examine what is going on. You know, I'm having this emotion, I'm having these thoughts, I'm having these fantasies, I'm having these memories, I'm having these fears. And then it's up to you at that point whether you're going to allow that to be there, or whether you're going to fight against it, pretend it's not there, try to overpower it, indulge it, act it out. That's your choice. And if you abdicate that choice, chances are you'll default to, let's fix it. It's wrong, it's bad, let's push it away, let's fix it. And then any action you take will not be a pure action, because it'll be a reaction. It won't be a pure action. It won't come from love. It will come from being afraid of the thing that you're trying to get rid of. And so basically, at that point, you're thinking you're doing good, but you're actually feeding the dark. That's why you see so many perpetually angry, unhappy activists, because their actions are not coming from love. Their actions are coming from trying to get rid of what they don't want. But imagine if I was a mean person and I wanted to dominate your experience of your life, it'd be very easy for me to do it. I would just try to convince you that in order to get what you want, you have to not think of pink elephants. You'd be thinking of pink elephants all day, trying to make sure you're not thinking of them. You'd literally be constructing in your mind 24/7 pink elephants to try to make sure that you weren't thinking of them.
We're not able to see you, Dr. K.
Oh, and then your life would be dominated by pink elephants. And you see, just substitute the word fear for pink elephants. Just substitute the word anger for pink elephants. Just substitute the thought. It shouldn't be that way. Just substitute all those for pink elephants. Just try to get rid of all those thoughts and all of those feelings. Try to push them away and try to do something to make it better. It's not going to make it better. Certainly not in the long run. There's no possibility of a new possibility because you're just being reactive. You see, this is what I mean about rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. There's no, in that way of being, we've seen the results of that way of being. Just look around. So to me, that's attempting to rearrange the furniture on the Titanic while the Titanic is sinking.
And so you're saying that if we can, you're offering that if we can get in tune with what is happening within,
not only in tune with it, but consciously allow it to be. Not tolerate it, but literally allow it to be. Here's a good rule of thumb. If something exists, whether it's physical or metaphysical in this moment, it's always to your advantage in the moment of being aware of that to allow that to be. Because it is. Because it is. Why fight reality? If God is one with reality, what are you saying? If there's only unity, what are you saying? I know better. What are you saying? It shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't have that thought. I know that for sure. What are you saying? What are you saying to God? You blew it, you idiot.
So would you share with us your process, because you kind of talked about a couple of the steps, right? The awareness and the allowing. Can you kind of explain like what this is and how it can help us? Because I think some of your other steps would be very helpful.
I mean, a full, useful instruction on the whole process of awareness to mastery is beyond my ability to do it in this time frame. But just suffice it to say that if you can't pass the second step, you can't go any further. And there are other steps, but for this conversation, I think it's more than enough to chew on, to realize that if something exists in a particular moment and you're aware that it exists in that moment, it is worse than fruitless to resist that it is.
So one question that might come up for some people is that, you know, for example, sometimes we're seeing things and we're not seeing it with, oftentimes we're not seeing it with a clear, through a clear lens. So when we're not seeing things with a clear lens, it can be useful to have a different perspective on it so we can.
Well, that's why I spent 35 minutes starting this conversation the way that I did. This is exactly why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because if all your life you've been wearing orange tinted glasses without knowing you've been wearing orange tinted glasses, you think you're seeing reality clearly. Not only that, but if somebody tells you that there's a possibility that you're wearing glasses, you probably wouldn't even believe it. And you, worse than that, you might not even know what glasses are and or what orange is. And then somebody comes along and tells you that inviting you to consider the possibility that you've been thrown into a way reality is occurring for you, that everything is tinted. You're not seeing anything as it is. And you were just thrown into a culture that had a prevailing level of consciousness and set of assumptions and beliefs that constituted the orange. And I'm saying that, and I'm saying that part of the ideas that constitute the orange is that in order to connect with what you want more closely, you have to fight against what you do not want. And I'm saying, how has that worked? I'm saying, what are the spiritual, ontological, psychological implications of that way of being? And could there be other ways of being that might work better for you, both in terms of the quality of your life and in terms of the effectiveness of your life? In other words, I'll give you a modern day example. If somebody's running a presidential campaign saying, I want you to vote for me because voting for the other person, because the other person is terrible. That's different than saying I'm running for president because I love my country and I love these values and I'm concerned about this. And here are my thoughts and ideas about how we got here. Here are my thoughts and ideas of another possibility. And here are some of my ideas and strategies to move toward that. And let's begin to look at what we do value and what we have in common as Americans and what it means to be an American and how did we go south. Those are completely different. One is saying, let's avoid this person, right? But that says absolutely nothing about what you're standing for, what you want to move toward.
Dr. K, could you step back a little bit?
Yeah. So that's a great example. That's a great example. It's like when people are in chronic stress, they're putting out fires. Their life is about putting out fires or attempting to minimize fires or trying to handle fires. So their life is about fires. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be fires, but I'm saying that it would be useful to look at what is your way of being and thinking that's correlated with this constant production of fires. And in addition, I'm saying that what you really want isn't just to put out the fire. What I'm saying is there's something else that you've lost touch with because you're under so much stress. You've lost touch with what you really want, that you believe this fire can threaten. And that if you could get in touch with what you really want and spend most of your time focused on cultivating your intimacy, your mastery, your understanding, your love, your wisdom for what it is that you want, over time you would have fewer and fewer fires. It'd be like if there was a hole in the boat, right? And you kept, that's what's happening. And then there's another hole in the boat, and then there's another one, and then there's another one. Well, maybe the material you're using for the boat is the issue. But you're so into plugging the hole that what you believe at that time is what you really want is to plug the hole. But that's only a very partial expression of what your heart desires. But now you're cut off from your heart's desire. You're just putting out fire after fire after fire. You're becoming a professional fireman. Okay. But then you have to have a lot of fires to keep your job.
So
in fact, you need a lot of fires to even have a sense of who you are and your value and your worth. And now you're being that my value comes from being a good fireman. So you need fires. And you forgot what you wanted was a beautiful building. And you stopped focusing on what would be a beautiful building and what might make it even more glorious and what might make it even more beautiful. And now you're not focused on what resonates with your joy anymore. Now you're not focused on what your passion really is. Now you're not focused on what your interest really is. And this is how the dark side plays you, putting you into crisis mode after crisis mode after crisis mode after crisis mode after crisis, and then they throw you a bone. Then the sugar daddy throws you a bone. They're playing bad cop, good cop. And then we argue about who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. That's what we've been being, that is correlated with all the crises that we've got. And so the very way of being that is, oh, I see this emotion, I see this thought, ooh, bad, wrong, I want to fix it, what can I do? That's just going to get you more crisis, crisis, crisis. That's just going to be more food for the dark, more food for the dark, more food for the dark. And if you're in a state of mind where your only option is to either fight what you don't want or to succumb to it, you're lost. You're so lost, you don't even know you're lost. You're blind. And there's probably an arrogance that goes along with that blindness. And now you're really cut off from your love connection. Now you're really food for the dark. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. Thank you. And so one of the things that I heard you say is that, so instead of trying to fix things, when we see things that might be wrong in our own life, might be, or if we see something that we might see as wrong outside, like just take a step back.
You see, that's part of the problem. You're seeing it as wrong. You're seeing it as wrong. Why not just see it as something that you don't prefer?
Yes. So
I mean, let's not go past this point.
So I use incorrect word.
But it's not that it's incorrect. It's disempowering. It disempowers you to be that way. I'm not judging you that it's right or wrong or good or bad. You projected that. I'm not being that way. You're being that way. I'm saying, what if that's not useful?
Yes.
What if that is not a useful way to be? What if it will not get you what you're really after? That's what I'm saying. I'm being something different than you're being. And that difference makes a difference. That's what I'm pointing at. You see how deep the conditioning is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the oh my God moment. That's like, oh, by the grace of God, have I even gotten to this point? You know, it's seeing the back of your head for a minute.
So people, so I think since we're kind of coming close to the end, like what would you like to share with people as the next steps of connect, if people who want to connect with you?
Well, I would say that if you've had the courage to stay with if you've had the courage to really be with all of this and not just go into believing it or not believing it, first of all, I want to salute you. That's an uncommon courage. And this really is a hero's journey. And in this particular video, I'm not focusing on more detailed distinctions. I'm not focusing on tips, strategies. It's important to know that they do exist. However, if I were to just start out by giving you a bunch of tips and strategies, and you would have been being what you were being before, you would have just rearranged the furniture on the Titanic. And so this conversation, which may seem very abstract, is not a masturbation in philosophy. I promise you that the possibility that I'm inviting you into, although it has no mass to it, and in that sense, it is an abstraction. It is a distinction. It is a possibility. You can't measure it. It doesn't have any mass. That it is real in the sense that it is powerful, in the sense that it literally is the possibility of a new possibility of being for you. And then very often in that possibility of that new possibility, then different strategies and tactics, sometimes even the same ones as before, that didn't work can now work. Because you're being a different being. So there's going to be a different quality of doing and thinking and speaking and vibing that will naturally happen. You don't have to make that happen. That just happens. And it's a journey. It's not like you're broken. I'm going to rewind the tape. It's not like you're broken and this is a conversation about how to fix you. No. That's not the game here. The game here is, what if nothing's broken? But there's just incredible opportunity for something that might be even more glorious. What if all the energy you took into fighting what is was liberated for you to just be? And get more in touch with what truly resonates with your joy, what your gifts and talents and strengths really are, what your interests really are, what your priority of values really is, what you're really grateful for. What if you could just pursue that? What if you could just create the space for yourself to not be so reactive, to be a little more truly creative? But you see, to the ego-based consciousness, this sounds like total new age gobbledygook, you see? Because the ego can't deal with things that it can't measure or compare or contrast. What if light has no real opposite? What if love has no real opposite? What if you really have no opposite? What if infinity has no opposite? What if the universe has no opposite? What if God has no opposite? What if growth has no opposite? What if virtue has no limits? You see? And so this is an unusual conversation, because most conversations are about either sharing information or about trying to persuade you to believe something. And this is neither. This is a weird conversation. This is a conversation that isn't about either of those two things. This is about something that is off the map if you're wearing orange glasses. This is a conversation about a possibility of a new possibility of being for you and for the culture. So it's natural to be a bit uncomfortable being with the conversation. But I'm encouraging you to not go into, that's bad, that's not wrong, I've got to get rid of the discomfort. I'm encouraging you to go, well, what if that's perfect too? I'm inviting you into the possibility of a life where you can have a dynamic, adventurous, powerful, romantic life without having to create all this drama of always having to have the bad guy. Especially if the bad guy is you. What if you don't need that kind of fear or panic to be motivated to move? What if you could be moved just by the nature of love and being? What if life has its own true motion? What if infinity has its own true motion of expression? These are unthinkable thoughts if you're wearing orange glasses that you don't know you're wearing. So that's what I want to say is I'm not here in this conversation to tie it all up for you. This is an invitation to be in this possibility and for you to see what you see, to feel what you feel, to think what you think. And there'll be some of you that this resonated with, and it's what you've been looking for, that you didn't know maybe you were looking for it, but now you know that's what you're looking for. And if that's the case, definitely put comments down below, and I will also include my contact information. And if Karmjit's willing, we'll build on this new possibility and see if we can fill it in, see if we can put some flesh on the bones here. But I'm not going to try to fix anything, which is going to be weird for many of you, because for many of you, you'd be out of a job. For many of you, you wouldn't even know who you are. For many of you, you wouldn't even know why to get out of bed if there was nothing to fix. This is a whole new thing. This is like really new, like radical new. Like where you don't need the bad guy in order to be passionate. It's like that. Like that new. I'm serious. That new. Are you up for that? Are you open to the possibility of that? Are you open to the possibility that you've been wearing orange glasses you didn't know you were wearing, without making you bad or wrong or judging yourself like that shouldn't have happened. Maybe it's perfect that it happened, because now you'll have more compassion for the people you're serving that are wearing those glasses. And you'll be able to say, I was there. I was there. I'm a living example. I know what you're going through. You wouldn't have been able to say that if you hadn't agreed at some level to wear those glasses without knowing you're wearing those glasses. So maybe that's not bad either. I hope you're getting my drift. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and the opportunity to ask you these questions. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So we will, are you willing to do some more of these?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so this is like the foundation of a possibility of building a more beautiful building. All right,
Looking
so
forward to it.
with that, we'll close with love and peace. And I'm going to stop the recording right now. Stop recording.